Bonjour à tous, my name's Alice and welcome back to my channel. I remember my mom wanted me and my sister to travel as much as possible when we were younger because she thought that traveling would become more and more expensive. Well, mum, you underestimated capitalism. In fact, today, you can almost travel for free. There are a bunch of YouTube videos that teach you how to travel for a very small price. And because it's summer now and people are getting vaccinated, people want to live life to the fullest again, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about those cheaper forms of traveling like woofing, aupairing and volunteering. This video is kind of a two-part video on the downsides of modern tourism, so if you don't want to miss the second part, well, I highly recommend you subscribe and you turn on the notifications as well. As someone who's always been traveling by myself, with friends or family, I cannot imagine giving up traveling, and I don't think anybody should, except if you're one of those people who travel to put some new flags onto your Instagram bios. People need to stop doing that. The reasons why I enjoy traveling so much is, yes, for the experience, getting to discover a new culture, discover a new art, new people, a new language maybe. But I have to recognize that a big reason why I was traveling so much was also to get those cute Instagram pictures, you know? Being a traveler, especially a solo traveler, really fits into that, you know, being the main character. Many people travel because they want to prove the world that their life is very interesting, that they also want to maybe put that on their CV. I'm not going to go too much in depth with all of this because I would like to talk about it a bit more in the second part of this video. But yeah, I think it's important to keep that in mind because as you're going to see in this video, there are people who are willing to put themselves into the worst situations to get that cool experience. And also, there are people who take advantage of that drive young people have to get that picture in Positano or to get that selfie with deprived kids. And it's not as romantic as the filters make it look. Today we'll focus on 3 very cheap, arguably free travel options. First, woofing, which stands for weekend workers on organic farms, or willing workers on organic farms, or even worldwide opportunities on organic farms. You get the idea. You go to a farm, usually in a foreign country, and you work for the farmer for 4, 5, 6 hours per day, and you get free meals and free location. I'm also interested in aupairing, as some of my friends and my boyfriend actually did it. The idea with aupairing is that you work for a family, so you take care of the kids, you don't have to pay for your food, you have free location, and you even get some money to spend on whatever you want to spend it on. And finally, volunteering, and more specifically the teaching abroad program. All these activities are framed as cultural exchanges, which means that each part is learning something, is gaining something from that experience. And that by extension, both parts are participating in something greater than themselves. At least that is what is advertised on the national platforms of woofing, on Au Pair World, or on volunteering websites such as International Volunteer HQ. The philosophy of these organizations is based on cooperation, exchange, learning. It's about going back to a simpler way of living and to find alternatives to our ever more individualistic and profit-oriented world. Woofing, for example, thought to provide low-cost labor force for poor farmers or farmers who are transitioning onto organic farming and don't have the money to afford workers. Same with Au Pair World, it helps low-income or medium-income families to get help for cheap in countries where childcare or child benefits aren't a thing or aren't sufficient. Nevertheless, those organizations presented as alternative, cooperative and sustainable end up emulating or even glossing over the corruptive power dynamics perpetuated by the economic system they thought to challenge.
I got sick from chemicals they asked me to spray on their crops. I'm not sure what the chemicals were because I'm not too familiar with farming chemicals and procedures. After leaving the farm, I naturally contacted the Woof USA office to report my experience at Canalou Kennels. I've exchanged several emails with the program director, Mr. Ryan Leo Goldsmith. In addition, since every Woof host page has volunteers comment section at the bottom of the page, I also submitted my comments on the Canalou Kennel Woof page. My comments were received and reviewed by Woof USA and have been banned from being posted, on the grounds that they are not acceptable. In regard to my getting sick from the chemicals at Kanalu, the program director simply commented, "I have asked him, Kanalu Kennels, to include in his host profile that he occasionally uses mildew control, which some people may be sensitive to." That was it. I have since checked the Kanalu Woof page, and it makes no mention of their use on mildew sprays.
A little over a couple of years ago, I moved to Argentina to live with a host family of 4 for 3 months. It was an au pair kind of situation where I would help out for 15 hours a week, teaching English, taking care of the kids, in exchange for food, a place to live and sleep, and the rest of my time free. So the person in question here is my host father. He was a really demanding guy, very manipulative, very manipulative. He would use long silences to make me feel stupid, or use things that I would say or do against me. I felt like I was always doing something wrong, screwing things up, and it kind of felt like I was falling into his mental traps.
So how did we go from a cultural exchange to slavery? There are several factors to that, and to be honest, they are quite symptomatic of how young workers, so millennials or even Gen Zs now, are treated in the workplace. They are willing to go underpaid to at least have a job. They are clearly undervalued, and it really affects their sense of self-worth. Actually, au pairing and woofing are quite comparable to a traditional work environment, meaning that the worker depends on the job to survive. Yet in the case of au pairing and woofing, the worker is trapped inside a corporation, the family or the farm. They do not receive money or a very small amount of money. They depend on the family to get to eat, to sleep somewhere, and most of them come from foreign countries, so they don't always speak the language. So yeah, the power dynamics are very, very unbalanced, and it's very easy for the host family to take advantage of it. Again, in corporations, young workers know that they are replaceable, they don't always know their rights, and they cannot rely on trade unions to help them because those unions have become weaker and weaker. With au pairing and woofing, unions simply don't exist because the work duration is quite short, and also because there is a confusion between tourism, volunteering, and proper work. For example, in the case of au pairing, the money they get, the salary, is referred to as pocket money, even though the au pair is officially registered as a worker. They tell you that you are a member of the family, which makes it very hard to renegotiate the contract or to even talk about money, actually. Organizations like Au Pair World appear to make sure that there is no abuse. They have an entire page dedicated to what the au pair should do if things don't go well, yet in reality they always side with the parents. As you can see here, the au pair Sasha sent an email to Au Pair World after she was exploited and then rejected by her host family. And the organization replied that they could not trust her and would not further investigate the issue. In the same documentary, I got this testimony from a French lady who's working at the French Union of Au Pair Agencies declared.
Alors, je suis pas très à l'aise quand on parle d'abus. Ça, c'est peut-être parfois une impression, je travaille trop, mais finalement, c'est souvent une mauvaise impression. Parce que parfois, le jeune qui estime travailler trop ne travaille pas trop, mais s'estime un peu trop seul.
What is really problematic here, and it's not limited to au pairing actually, is that we do not trust young girls. We don't see them as workers, but as lazy teenagers, despite the fact that they proved that the contract was not respected. In a way, Lash Testimony is quite similar. Woof USA probably thought that she was yet another sensitive young woman who didn't understand that farm work is hard work. And yeah, they didn't further investigate the issue either. Okay, so now let's transition onto woofing, and it doesn't get better. So imagine that, like thousands of teenagers, you've just graduated high school and you're thinking about what you want to do next year, and why not going on a gap year? So you start thinking about it a bit more, and you decide that you want to go work on an organic farm in New Zealand. You go onto the New Zealand government website, and you found out that they have a visa especially for you, a working holiday visa, as they call it. That specific visa allows each year 2 million individuals to come to New Zealand and work there as part of their holiday. So to sum it up, New Zealand is in shortage of labour, and they rely on organisations like Woof New Zealand, for example, to bridge that gap and bring all those workers, low-paid workers, that aren't protected by the same legislation as New Zealanders. So the government takes advantage of the 150 New Zealand dollars visa, and the farmers also save a lot of money. Recently, woofing has become way more diversified, so now you can do things like household chores, you can organize cultural events. I remember when I was in Portugal, I met this Brazilian girl, she was doing exactly that. And I know some of you will come after me and say that I make everything problematic, that most of the time both the traveller and the host have a very good experience, and that there's nothing wrong with New Zealand making a bit of profit out of it. Well, I won't apologise for this, because I think we need to talk more about worker rights, and especially us normalising the deterioration of those rights. If you are creating value, you deserve to be rewarded accordingly. For many, myself included, work gives us a sense of self-worth. And so when you are underpaid, like I've been sometimes in the past, it really makes you feel bad about yourself. Okay, I think it's finally time to add volunteering to the mix. So we mostly talked about the consequences of exploitation and the lack of worker rights on the worker and the need to better those rights. But we sometimes forget the impact that those types of precarious jobs can have on an economy, on a society. Every year, thousands of young adults go to Africa or Asia to do volunteering. One of the most popular programs is the Teaching Abroad program, where young and qualified individuals will go to deprived areas and teach kids how to speak English or any other subject for a very short period, so 2 weeks to a few months. You see where I'm going here. Well, yeah, people are slowly starting to realize how bad it is for the kids, that learning requires consistency and someone that is qualified to provide the teaching. We would never tolerate something like that in the North, so while we're doing that to them, another issue that allows me to link volunteering to aupairing and woofing is the fact that young foreign and qualified workers who are okay working at very low paid jobs or even willing to pay for their trip, because some volunteering programs are very expensive, and so all those young peoples are potentially taking the jobs of locals, local nurses, local farmers, local teachers. They are in a way disrupting the economic ecosystem of that area. And it's not really their fault. They are very much encouraged by governments, by private agencies, but also by social media. I really wanted to make this video relating those different forms of cheap traveling because, as I try to demonstrate, they are symptomatic of one, our growing disregard for precarious jobs, and two, the internationalization of those precarious jobs. We clearly avoid talking about those issues on big media platforms. In fact, bringing all those issues to the table would lead us to question why worker rights have become so weak. But we don't want to do that because the survival of our globalized economic system depends on the existence of those precarious, very insecure jobs. Woofing and aupairing are in a way part of what is now referred to as the gig economy, which is defined as a labour market characterised by the prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work as opposed to permanent jobs. In a way, they can be similar to jobs like being a Uber driver, a Fiverr writer, an Amazon reseller. They appear to give the worker more freedom, more flexibility, yet they do not provide any rights. They make you even more dependent on the people above you, so the host family, the farmer, or in the case of Uber and Fiverr, the platforms where the service is provided. So what type of society do we want? We can start by going back to the ideals and values of woofing, aupairing, and volunteering. Among them, cultural exchange, reducing monetary transactions to promote cooperation, localism, skill development, negotiation, open-mindedness, and education. These values are becoming increasingly popular, and they can be translated into politics. We hear a lot about direct democracy, which means that we remove any form of representative body, no representatives, just citizens who decide how to organize and distribute power. It's a horizontal distribution of power and not a vertical one like we have today. It means that each citizen is educated and is willing to cooperate, to find a consensus, or to negotiate and try to convince the other part to reach unanimity. An example of radical direct democracy is the Commune, communalism, as it existed in Paris in the late 19th century, and still exists today actually. Communes largely rely on self-management. They prevent any form of power imbalances by making sure that people do not stay in positions of power for too long. And above everything, they trust people's ability to decide what is best for their community. Communes can be broken down into very small entities, so it can be a farm, a tiny village, or it can even be a city, as long as its inhabitants agree on the terms of the commune and share power. I'll put some resources in the description box in case you want to learn more about those type of movements. I think they're quite interesting, actually. I've also been recommended Building the Commune, published by Verso books, so yeah, I would also recommend this one. But yeah, I guess it's kind of hard for us to imagine that we could build an entire society around cooperation and fair exchange, like woofing and aupairing and volunteering were meant to be, because we don't have any framework to conceptualize it yet. But you know, even if you're not entirely convinced that this could ever happen, at least it's good to imagine futures and not settle for things that have already been experimented. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, we can continue that discussion in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe if it's not done already. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Salut!